Damn, it's hot, huh? Oh, damn. Yeah, damn, that's what I wanted to say. Some people are too lucky to sit in the hot South Texas sun on church steps, damn hot steps, and argue with God. And perhaps for Jimmy's sake, I'd better not swear and leave God in a good mood. It will be difficult for him to climb the heavenly road to God anyway. He was a damn good man, but loaded with sins on this difficult climb. Yes, his road is much harder than the small climb I'm looking at. Oh, why? Why did I even agree to speak at his funeral? But it was impossible to look his father in the eye and say no. A decrepit old man with a walker who can barely stand or move. Battered and abandoned, as it is often said, especially here in Texas. For Jimmy's father, it was jaded, abandoned, and broken. He's been a professional rodeo racer for too long. A proud, proud old man whose eyes should not and cannot hold tears. Telling him no was beyond my strength. Jimmy was all he had left. Now just his broken old body and memories. But damn, he asked me yesterday afternoon, not an hour ago. At least I think I have an hour. The damn priest knows he has a captive audience, and he'll make at least an hour's sermon out of it. But how can I decide what to say in an hour, when I haven't been able to put anything together since yesterday, almost all night too? Lack of words is not my problem. 4 years old, who can remember when you're 4, I can't. Jimmy's family moved across the street from us when Jimmy was also 4. So Jimmy was always in my life. So yes, I have a lot to say about Jimmy, James Ray Barrett. Then Bethany moved into the house next door to him a year later at 5, too. We became the Three Musketeers forever. Not a stone was turned over, not a tree was left unpicked, and not a puddle was left unexplored. The Three Musketeers conquered everything. Worms, snakes, and toads did not frighten the Musketeers. Spring rain and summer heat did not delay us on our way to the games. The winds of autumn or the cold of winter did not keep us from winning games of cowboys and Indians or cops and robbers. For 3 small children, it was almost like living in the Garden of Eden, as close as we would ever get. Even school time didn't slow us down. 3 Musketeers in one class, so damn, hang in there, Katie. It's a good thing that South Texas teachers are a special breed and are not allowed to carry firearms. Otherwise, school classes would be much smaller, without 1 or 2 musketeers. But just like the real Garden of Eden, ours featured a snake or 2. One rears its head in every boy or girl's life. It can turn a young man's world upside down, and it affects Jimmy the most. Of course, Bethany was already on her period, and her growing breasts were becoming noticeable. For some reason, this didn't really affect me. Mom said that my voice became deeper, but these changes seemed insignificant to me. But not for Jimmy, no, he got it all at once. He stretched out and stood over 6 feet and continued to grow. His shoulders widened as if he were already wearing football pads. Muscles, no, his muscles were overgrown with muscles. His voice cracked and broke, squeaked, and then shook the earth with its bass rumble. The onset of puberty pushed Jimmy into the biggest mistake of his life. He fell in love with one of his best friends, the girl next door. Yes, I've heard all these words: puppy love, double crush, summer crush, spring crush, or just rising hormones. But I knew differently because he had the same expression on his face as my father. Mom and Dad had a big fight, and she took our suitcases out of the closet and threw clothes in them. Furious and so angry at each other that they didn't even notice me. Scared out of my mind, damn it. All children understand what divorce is, and mine looked at me. Mine? Of course, children are just as involved in divorce as their parents. Even at 9 years old, I knew this. The reason for the quarrel was not obvious, and I think they did not remember it either. Deaf, dumb, and blind Davy, me. Well, not deaf and not blind. But I was definitely stunned, because I stood like a tree in its roots. I wanted no, had to move and talk. Should have stopped this train wreck happening right in front of me. I could not. Understanding dawned on Dad's face, turning chalky white. Mom leaves. He immediately stopped arguing, but Mom's rage continued along with the packing of things. From behind, he tried to put his hands on her shoulders, but she pushed them away. Not much, she just didn't want to be touched. Plus, she was still yelling at him. Finally, he forced her to turn around, but she continued to fight and scream. But Dad stood silently, which made her look into his eyes. Those eyes showed anxiety and fear, but also pure love. Love that surpasses everything. A penetrating love that knocked Mom out of her rage, and she hugged his waist and buried herself in his chest, crying, the suitcases returning to the closet empty. Jimmy had that expression that day, the day the Three Musketeers fell apart. B and Jimmy came up to me. We called Bethany B, at least until that day. After that, I called her Bethany. Your turn, Davy, B said with a mischievous smile. My turn? My turn for what? It's your turn to kiss and dirty your fingers. With her evil grin, she made the up and down fist motion that all boys know. When I looked at Jimmy's face, I asked B, have you played these games with Jimmy yet? Yeah, so now it's your turn, stupid. Then I saw it, an expression of love. Also, an expression of horror. He didn't want to risk sharing it with anyone else. Even with me, another musketeer, but he agreed because she wanted it, and it was me. Can a young boy recognize these emotions? Now perhaps, but then I knew exactly what it was, love, the same expression as my dad. Well, Bethany, since you played those games with Jimmy, you're his girlfriend now. Jimmy's my buddy, and you can't betray your best friend by trying to steal his girl. Looking into Jimmy's eyes, I knew I had done the right thing. Also now I had a friend for life, no matter what, and I owed it. I didn't think about it, Davy, but now I realize it might be true. Is this what you want, Jimmy? Yes, B, that's how I want it. You and me forever. Just you and me. Well, it will be so, because I won't play with anyone but you two. You both are closer to me than anyone except my mom. So, that day, the first serpent in our Garden of Eden, Puberty, tore the Three Musketeers apart. After that it was Jimmy, Bethany, and their best friend Davy. This also awakened the second serpent in our Garden of Eden, Queen Elizabeth. No, not the Queen of England, especially not on the plains of South Texas. Jimmy and I called Bethany's mother Queen Elizabeth, because she did consider herself a queen, and her name was Elizabeth Ann Scott. Men have a junior suffix, but women's names have nothing similar, such as John Jacob Astor Roman III. But Queen Elizabeth came close, Bethany Lisa Scott. But with a slight twist, it's Lisa Beth Scott, her mini-me. Like those dads with beer bellies who want their 10-year-old son to become a quarterback and a youth football star, even if it means half-deathing the child. All to relive their once glorious, but often greatly exaggerated glory days. It was also Queen Elizabeth's goal for her mini-me, Princess Bethany, to relive her exaggerated glory days through her daughter. If I was smarter and had a crystal ball, I would have told her to be careful what she wishes for because they might come true. When young Bethany was a tomboy running around the plains of South Texas as one of the Three Musketeers, plus frequent additional members, can you say like a wolf pack? No, more like a bunch of coyote puppies with baby teeth and always in trouble. The Queen's attention was inactive, until she noticed that it was no longer the Three Musketeers. It was Jimmy Bethany, and it caught her attention with a crash and squeal of brakes. The tomboy instantly disappeared, and the ladies' training began. Why Bethany wasn't sent to boarding school, I still don't understand. She was threatened with this quite often over the years. If you don't behave, I'll send you to a boarding school away from these two degenerates. Perhaps her father had stood up for her for once and stopped it, but maybe it would be better if he didn't. Her father was virtually absent from Bethany's life. He devoted his life to trying to compensate for his role in thwarting Queen Elizabeth's predetermined path. His role? Work, a lot of work, because it took a lot of money to replace the loss in her life due to his mistake. His mistake? Well, of course, it is his mistake when a young woman becomes pregnant out of wedlock. To her family, he is the bastard who got their dear daughter Princess Baby into trouble. To his family, son, you have to take responsibility. Or you should correct your mistake by marrying her and providing for them both. You screwed up, you fixed it. His mistake, damn it. I have never understood Queen Elizabeth's predestined path. Her parents weren't rich, and even on her best days, she would never have been Miss Texas. Heck, Bethany was much prettier in terms of looks. Later in life, Bethany would be called hot, sexy, or even quite attractive, but truly beautiful. No. But in her own mind, Queen Elizabeth saw her destiny in Dallas-Fort Worth high society, wealth, charity banquets, debutante balls, and limousines on the red carpets of movie premieres. How she planned to get there, I don't know. No wealth or great beauty, just a Seguin, Texas high school education. Sure, she went to college, but that's where her self-proclaimed path went off the rails. At the frat house, at a party with drinking and subsequent pregnancy. Yes, it's all his fault. As for college, in all my years in their house, I never once heard mention of a major or course of study or if she graduated at all. But in my opinion, it was the degree of Mrs. this doctor, Mrs. lawyer, or preferably Mrs. Fred incredibly rich heir. Rice University would be a good place to find some of them. That's the only way I could see her getting into Dallas-Fort Worth high society. Sitting on someone's back, yeah, I don't like her. Now her only way there is by sitting on Bethany's back. Seguin, Texas, our hometown, and the site of those damn hot church steps. 35 miles northeast of San Antonio and 50 miles southwest of Austin, population approximately 31,000. Too big to be a small town where everyone knows everyone else's business. Small enough to not have the crime and substance of big cities, a really good place to raise kids. Yes, our Garden of Eden. In all this mental flow about Queen Elizabeth, I still have to give her some credit. She took responsibility and married little Bethany's father. Plus, according to gossip and rumors, she remained a faithful and loving wife and mother. Her house was always clean, dinner was on the table at the right time, and Bethany's clothes were always clean. Well, at least they started the day clean. Coyote puppies are never really clean. But she was a vixen, grumpy. When we were young, dinner tables in our homes were different. At Jimmy's house or mine, they would put 2 extra plates on the table for dinner if the Three Musketeers were nearby. But not at the Scott house, where it was clear that Jimmy and I were not welcome guests. I guess I wasn't very old when I started to dislike Queen Elizabeth. But all this is not the reason why I attack Queen Elizabeth. This is what she did after she saw Jimmy Bethany. As I said, the Bethany kid disappeared instantly, but I didn't realize the consequences of her next action until I was older. Bethany was put on birth control pills. When she told Jimmy and me about it, we kind of said, "So what?" It was explained to us quite forcefully how much Queen Elizabeth forced her to take the pill every morning. We wisely decided to agree with her. Then came the rules. Bethany could never be alone with Jimmy. She always had to be in a group. She didn't mention the other boys' names. It didn't say that I couldn't be alone with Bethany, just Jimmy. Yes, she said it right in front of the 3 of us. But you really can't stop someone from seeing their neighbor who goes to the same school. I think Queen Elizabeth understood that. She just needed to control it. With age comes a more mature understanding. So looking back and now having a daughter, I think I can understand. Jimmy looked older than us, much more mature. But I don't think he was mentally mature, just a young guy in a grown man's body and just as vulnerable. But also, in my more mature understanding, I really think that if Queen Elizabeth had left things as they were, this puppy love might have run its course like any other teenage love. But no, she kept the drama high and turned it into a Romeo and Juliet love story. But what if I were right? Would true love be so terrible? Loving one person all your life seems like the perfect love story to me. Definitely preferable to the damn storm. It turned out to be, oh, God forgive me, church steps and everything you know. Regardless of whether it was a lifelong affair or not. Jimmy was unacceptable to Queen Elizabeth. Bethany didn't even get a vote. I can imagine Queen Elizabeth's tirade. No cowboy roofer's son would be good enough for my daughter. Yes, a roofer, Jimmy's father started the roofing business when he had to retire from rodeo, and it was had to. If he could, he'd still be breaking broncs and riding bulls. But marriage and injuries pushed the eternal cowboy into the background. Queen Elizabeth forbade Bethany from dating boys. By allowing it only because she had to, she caught Bethany in a lie. Bethany was supposed to go with her friends, but ended up with Jimmy instead. He bought his first new pickup truck. So, after a month of arrest, Bethany began dating. It was only with her desire for control that a new Queen's decree was needed and implemented. Guess what? The decree was about Jimmy. Bethany would be allowed to date Jimmy. She just needed to go on 2 dates with other guys before the next one with Jimmy. Of course, the argument was that Bethany was too young to date just one boy, especially Jimmy. We live in the great United States of America. We have the right to freedom of speech, the right to vote, the right to bear arms, and the right to raise our children as we see fit. So yes, Queen Elizabeth had the right to dictate dating rules to her daughter. But all I knew was that she was picking on Jimmy, and my friend was hurting. Later, Queen Elizabeth's last rule was completely overboard. She discovered that Jimmy and Bethany were intimate. They were caught fooling around at Bethany's house, and her parents returned home early, so Jimmy found himself in the front row of the fight. Jimmy admitted that the decree was shouted in anger. But being the manipulative and controlling bitch that she is, Queen Elizabeth didn't back down. Decree? If you're going to sleep with him, you're going to sleep with other boys too. I don't know for sure, but Jimmy told me they weren't really caught having sex, just very close, and Jimmy never lied to me. The next part of the Queen's decree also applied to Jimmy. He was to have sex with other girls. Their punishment for being caught was that they could not meet with each other until they assured the Queen that her instructions would be carried out. I don't even want to think about how she will enforce these rules. Wasn't she the one who prescribed birth control pills for her daughter? What does this tell your daughter, except you can have sex or I don't trust you? So, wouldn't it be a little hypocritical to object to discovering that the same daughter almost lived up to both of your unspoken expectations? But part of Queen Elizabeth's personality is her forgiving nature and trusting soul, plus her willingness to admit she was wrong. Yes, that's right. Jimmy and Bethany swore they never went through with it, not that night or ever. I think even her dad tried to get her mom to back off. Tried to convince her mother that there was no real evidence of their sexual intercourse. He told her that this was an unreasonable demand, but eventually he left and left as usual. Then Jimmy was pushed out, but he said that even from outside the house, Queen Elizabeth's scream could still be heard, and the drama continued. I can imagine that the Queen's anger was immense. To arrive to find the very thing she had been fighting against for years happening right in her own home. Yes, she would be angry. Almost 3 months passed before Jimmy got another date with Bethany. My friend was very confused, and I tried to console him, but it didn't work. Bethany dated Johnny Crawford, Jeremy Wilkes, and worst of all, Gary Coleman. Jimmy and Gary did not get along. Somewhere in the midst of this shitstorm of events, I had my last real conversation with Bethany. It was short-lived and not friendly. I didn't use the exact words, but essentially I asked Bethany why she didn't tell her mom to shut up. All she said was, "I can't, it's my mom," again and again, and cry. But I didn't really like her, and we were never close again. Polite, yes. Close, no. Maybe it was just drama, but I was worried about him. I found him wandering along the riverbank late in the evening. We lived on Tor Lane, near a bend in the Guadalupe River, so I tried to be with him often, just in case. That's probably why I didn't really like her. Later, age and maturity made me realize that Bethany had never been a very strong person, not even anything like a submissive one. But how could she be anything else? Is the mother immersed in unfulfilled dreams and unrealistic expectations? Who was stubborn, controlling, and manipulative? Add in a non-involved father, and she didn't stand a chance. Jimmy dated Mary Ellen Adams and Stephanie Mitchell before dating Bethany again. Should they have followed Queen Elizabeth's decree? I don't know. I wouldn't ask Bethany. It's none of my business. I didn't ask Jimmy because I didn't want to hurt my friend's pride, but then again, that was none of my business. Later, 2 important things emerged. The first one was what I think ultimately killed Jimmy: toys. One day, as I walked to his locker, I watched Jimmy and Maribeth Olsen talking. Maribeth was touchy and seductive, but Jimmy seemed indifferent. They said a few words as I came closer, only for Maribeth to turn away and run past me in tears. Jimmy still looked uninterested. What happened to Maribeth? Oh, she wanted to go somewhere this weekend. But I have a date with Bethany this weekend. Doesn't it bother you when they cry like that? No, they're just toys. Bethany is the only real one. Queen Elizabeth taught them that other people are toys to be used, rules that must be followed until Romeo and Juliet can be together again. Their emotions and relationships made sense, but other people's emotions and feelings were just toys. She also taught them how to easily find other partners, plus gave them a lot of practice in acquiring them. Hell, even my mom said Jimmy was handsome. He's 6'4", 225 pounds, muscle on muscle, and not an ounce of fat anywhere. Blue-black hair, the eternal 5 o'clock shadow, and beautiful facial features, but most importantly piercing blue eyes and large hands with long fingers. No, I don't like men and I'm not bi. That's how my mom described it. Oh, big legs. She always had to add that too. Yes, Jimmy Handsome collected toys easily. His own brand new pickup truck before anyone else had a junker. Add in the amount of money he always had in his pockets, and dating him in high school was easy. Even though Jimmy didn't play sports, he was still popular. Instead, he always worked with his father, so yes, he had money. Bethany also had no problem getting dates, partly because of the rumors. How this got out, I don't know, but there were rumors that she had to end it before she could get another date with Jimmy. Bethany was Jimmy's girlfriend. This, and the rumors, made it clear to the boys that they did not need to court Bethany. She was Jimmy's girlfriend, and she just needed to figure out the date she might have set before she could be with Jimmy again. There were rumors that she would spend at least part of her dates racing submarines and fighting octopuses in the back seat, or maybe she didn't even wrestle. I didn't ask, it was just none of my business. Queen Elizabeth also taught them how to throw away toys easily. The next one will always be there when you need it. High school relationship drama, on-again, off-again relationships and breakups are something Jimmy and Bethany didn't have to deal with. At least them weren't affected by emotions. But they have also lost all the learning, responsibility, and sexual maturity that comes from experiencing these relationships and their consequences. I think that's what Jimmy ended up doing. It just took fate a long time to get to this point. Toys. To Jimmy, they are just toys, and that is what destroyed him, Bethany too. Jimmy's father was a bully and a bore. Bronze Dancy Hall cowboy with 2 step kickers on the bottom and Stetson on top, with a large silver belt buckle in the middle. He polished the silver buckle on many dance hall carts. Later they polished it. Well, yeah, church steps. The only problem is that he didn't stop polishing his belt buckle with dance hall dolls after he married Jimmy's mom. She wasn't a dance hall girl, but that's where they first met. When he was 7 years old, the second most important woman in Jimmy's life appeared. He had a younger sister, and he reacted to this baby as if he himself had given birth to her. If the Three Musketeers had any plans, Jimmy would sometimes go away to be with his little sister and hold her in his arms. He named her Rose. Less than a year later, Jimmy's family divorced. Little was said about it, and it was a quiet divorce. Mom and little sister left. Jimmy and his father stayed behind. Guess she wasn't Dad's jerk. That was Jimmy's only comment, and he never spoke about it again. He never saw them again, but I saw them today. It was the first time I had seen Carolyn and Rose in 37 years. Yes, Jimmy was 44 when Yes. Queen Elizabeth's final stroke ended Romeo and Juliet's love affair. The big secret was revealed to me. Cliché of clichés, young lovers will run away. Right after their graduation ceremony, they planned to run away and get married before anyone could stop them. Plans were made, rooms were booked, blood tests were taken, the certificate was ready, and the ring was purchased. Bethany was never very strong. Maybe, I'm not sure. But somehow Queen Elizabeth found out about this. She didn't come out to fight or scream. She came up with a plan, a counterproposal for marriage, college at Rice University, and the legacy of the same sorority to which Queen Elizabeth belonged, and a brand new red Mercedes Roadster with a convertible top, all for Bethany. Besides, she could remain engaged to Jimmy and spend the summer however they wanted, and even live together, unless they got married or pregnant before graduating from college. Bethany accepted the offer. I thought the permission for the summer was beyond cruel. I knew the same thing as Queen Elizabeth. A very strong woman would have to wait 4 years for a lot of attractive men, rich men, and, of course, more acceptable men to come to Rice University. This summer will give Jimmy the chance to feel what he wants before fall throws him off. I tried to warn Jimmy about what I thought was going to happen. He didn't agree, but he didn't mind either. Jimmy's dad had a Dancy Hall part-time girlfriend in Austin. He moved in with her for the summer and left the Seguin house for Jimmy and Bethany, right next door to her mom, and I couldn't figure out if that was a good thing or a bad thing. I giggled, imagining Queen Elizabeth in bed and thinking about what Bethany and Jimmy were doing right next door at night. But Queen Elizabeth still took care of business in Bethany during the day while Jimmy worked. Jimmy was always working. How do I know this? Because most of the time I worked next to him. They had a busy roofing business and found us cleaning up the area and staging the next day, sometimes late into the night. We moved materials, stacked them, and made sure the next day's crew had everything they needed, often across multiple job sites. That's where Jimmy got his muscles on. Working on muscles he didn't get in the gym later became the reason he bought his new pickup truck. On Saturdays, being big and strong enough, he made the team on the roof and received the same salary. I wasn't there for the first couple of years, but then Dad Barrett kept me on the roof almost every Saturday too. Barrett and Son Roofing commanded 3 brigades: Austin Crew, Seguin Crew, San Antonio Crew. The summer after he graduated, Jimmy took over the San Antonio team. It was obvious to everyone that his father would never reach retirement age working or even running a business. Papa Barrett was 35 when Jimmy was born and 53 when Jimmy graduated from high school. They both knew that at 60 he wouldn't be working. So maybe before Jimmy turns 30, everything will be his responsibility. Papa Barrett has been trying to rodeo for too long. Burnt both ends of the candle too hard and too fast. Work, party, take them all and sleep lightly, move on. I still remember that drunken scream. The problem was that even at 53, he was still trying to live by singing. Now, at 75, all that remains is a shell and memories, but no Jimmy. I don't think Pa Barrett will last long, especially if he has to run the company the same way Jimmy started it. 5 crews in Austin, plus a storage shed with a DIY lumber store out front. An equipment warehouse with their own heavy equipment shop that took on not only their own equipment repairs, but any other heavy equipment repairs they could order. Seguin's office was down to 1 team, but became the headquarters for operations. There was a scheduler dispatcher, as well as 3 sales bidding people, a purchasing agent, a receptionist, an accountant payroll, and a human resources department. And all this on the ground floor of a 6-story office building. The San Antonio division expanded to 3 crews, a warehouse, equipment, and maintenance shop. In short, Jimmy took the roofing business of Barrett and Son from a one-owner business that paid its small crews in cash on Friday to a large company doing multi-million-dollar-a-year business. After his parents divorced, Jimmy and his father were left alone in the house across the street. His father never remarried, not even close. However, they always took care of each other until his father couldn't anymore. Jimmy then took care of him. He said he would never send his father to one of the old people's prisons. I knew he meant the nursing home. He never did, but when the 18-hour, 6-day work week made Jimmy realize his dad needed more, Jimmy hired a live-in healthcare worker, the nurse who wanted to leave the hospital. He said he had 2 options: become heartless or quit nursing. He had seen too much suffering in too many years. Jimmy also hired a part-time housekeeper cook, a sweet, awkward Latina grandma. Yes, she was an American citizen. Even in his roofing business, Jimmy did not hire illegal immigrants. My mother only came between Jimmy and his father once. This was during the first year after the divorce. Dad Barrett and she discussed the number of women he brought home while his young son was there. After their conversation, he no longer brought toys to the Seguin house, but played elsewhere. As a result, Jimmy spent more time in our house than in his, at least until he was old enough to take care of himself, and my mom decided when that would be. Even in later years, because of my mother's feelings, Jimmy never brought toys into the Seguin house. The respect was strong, although she never said anything about it to Jimmy. Later life showed that respect for women was one of Jimmy's incomprehensible quirks. Any woman in a dance hall or club was a toy and not totally subhuman, unless you were the other half of one of our friends. Then you were real and not a toy. If you dated one of our friends but weren't significant, you were a toy that no one would touch. If you belonged to an older generation of women and are known to be a good woman, you were not a toy, you were treated with respect and courtesy, but never touched. But if you were seen in a dance hall chasing men, you would be a toy and an open play. If you were Jimmy's toy, there would be few ways for you to get out of this box. The girl who was one of Jimmy's toys but became important to someone Jimmy respected, you became real and therefore untouchable. Additionally, the mental computer file that stored your status and all the fun and games you had with Jimmy was permanently deleted from your life's hard drive. I can only think of a few women who themselves took the step from a toy to a real woman. Susie Fisher became a firefighter after being a toy in high school, a one-and-done date during my senior year of high school. As a firefighter, Susie pulled her mother out of a burning car for the first time. Diving into the back seat, she knocked out two of the children and ran away while carrying the third. When the car exploded, other women who moved beyond toy status didn't have to do anything so heroic, just something special that elevated them to human status. One thing changed when the woman left plaything status. The possibility of having a sexual or romantic relationship with Jimmy disappeared. He treated good women with respect and politeness, but never touched them. The toys were sexy, but in some strange way subhuman. Bethany was the only sexy and romantic woman possible. I think that's the only reason Mom felt comfortable talking things over with Dad Barrett. Plus, I think my mom has become more important to Jimmy than his own mother. I know that he respected her more than his own, even more than any other woman. My mom helped Daddy Barrett keep his promise to his ex-wife. Caroline, Jimmy's mother, was raised Catholic and attended Mass very regularly. She wanted Jimmy to continue attending Mass even after she left. So, on Sundays, if Jimmy's father forgot, Mom would take Jimmy to Mass with us. Additionally, Jimmy's mom provided counseling through church to help him cope with his parents' divorce. These consultations later played an important role in the story of Bethany and Jimmy. In the fall, when Bethany and the little red convertible drove away, Jimmy was left alone. Alone, actually, because I spent all the money Papa Barrett paid me over the years and went to the University of Texas at Austin and the Cockrell School of Engineering. I have always excelled in mathematics and computers. Also, I prefer to create things rather than tear them down. Bridges and buildings seem interesting to build. My roommates decided they really liked Jimmy. Instead of partying in Seguin or San Antonio, Austin was only 50 miles away, and his good buddy and fellow musketeer me. Plus, the other students loved Jimmy. Students and roommates had plenty of Jimmy to like. A new pickup truck, nice clothes, a high-paying job, and no bills meant he had plenty of money to go around. Oh, the tall, dark, and handsome guy with piercing blue eyes and big hands and feet helped too. An 18-hour work week that he had to work through over the weekend meant the party started when Jimmy arrived. A generous, funny guy who doesn't mind buying a few extra portions, shots, or pizza for poor college students. He will dance with all the girls, so he attracts a lot of girls. This was something my dorm neighbors really appreciated because there were always extras. I admit, in my first year, I was also lucky there a couple of times. So it was all fun and games until Jimmy found the girl he wanted, at least for that night. With a wink and a wave, I realized I would have to find another way back to the dorm. He would pick me up for breakfast, brunch, lunch, whichever was appropriate. We hang out or find something to do. The evening found us where there was a party that night, and then an exact copy of the previous night, except that in the morning I had left for classes and Jimmy had already returned to work. At the time, I thought it was a good time in Jimmy's life. He was more relaxed and seemed happier than he had in years. He left behind the stress and drama of Queen Elizabeth and Bethany, dating and engagements. Plus, he just finished the summer, and he wanted to play at home with Bethany. But this is where I have to start acknowledging my contribution to this shitstorm. I helped perpetuate inappropriate behavior that was morally wrong. The only excuse I had was that I was so young and college was my first taste of adult freedom. Jimmy was a stud, and so was I. For the first time in my life, girls came easily and left just as easily. Jimmy and I were the center of attraction for a large circle of friends and acquaintances who occasionally met with an even larger group of country music and dance fans. Two steps and line dancing, jitterbug and beer, but no drugs. There were many students at UDE who had never been to Texas before, even some international students. They all wanted to party and dance like Texas cowboys and cowgirls, and we were there to help them. John Travolta in Urban Cowboy was a popular movie in the 80s, but the culture was still going strong in parts of Texas in the early to mid-90s. When I thought about Jimmy and Bethany's engagement, it was short and not very deep. Was Jimmy doing something that an engaged man shouldn't do? Hell yeah, but I'm sure Bethany did the same thing at Rice University with her little red convertible. Also, I felt like with them, it was just in SOP, a standard operating procedure. Was his treatment of a female students kosher? Well, it's more of a gray area. Yes, he played fast and loose with the many emotions of young women, as well as their budding sexuality, but so did many other freshman boys. It wasn't a one-way street either. Many women played fast and loose too. But in our defense, and I followed Jimmy's example, the conditions of participation were clearly spelled out in advance. Nothing serious, all done, or just for shit and laughs were the terms of the engagement. So for most students, it wasn't even a gray area. They were ready to go. But as always when it comes to emotions and sex, it has become a bit of a gray area for some students. They wanted the fun and games to continue, perhaps forever. But for me and Jimmy, everything was ready. Work, party, take them all and sleep lightly, move on. At the time, I didn't realize what this kind of behavior in universities does to us. It just cemented it in concrete and brought light to the destructive teachings of Queen Elizabeth for all three of us. Later, I luckily found a good woman who made me get my head out of my ass and see things in the light of day, and I had Jimmy to thank for that too. Jimmy spent his second summer playing around the house before Bethany's mini-me fulfilled her destiny. In the middle of the second year, there was a drunk student party. Queen Elizabeth must have been delighted, but neither Jimmy nor I received invitations. We wouldn't have gone anyway. The Three Musketeers had long since disbanded, and this was just the final nail in the coffin. I noticed Jimmy didn't return his ring. He didn't ask about it, didn't talk about it, and stopped talking about it a long time ago. I tried to support him as best I could and be there if he wanted to talk. He seemed to have expected this. So when it happened, he wasn't too shocked, or so I thought. But something inside him died, and it showed up 2 years later. Bethany returned to Seguin, Texas, with a baby, 2 black eyes and bruises, plus divorce papers for adultery, her infidelity. I wasn't surprised. Well, Jimmy, at least now you can marry her. I won't, Davy, and she already knows I won't. Why not? In those counseling sessions after my parents' divorce, Father Garrett taught me the sanctity of marriage. Even though my father and mother were divorced by the laws of our country because they were married by a priest, they were still married in the eyes of the church and in the eyes of God. Same thing with Bethany. Even if he officially divorces her for cheating, they are still married and her child still has a father who is not me. Oh, sure, we'll have fun and date for a while, but I won't marry her. It'll be temporary. Bethany wants to be married, and this kid needs a father figure and someone to help support them. But it won't be me. The desire to have a wife or family died inside Jimmy. Bethany became pregnant and married, which killed that desire. Emotionally, it was like a divorce for Jimmy, just like his parents' divorce, and like his father, Jimmy never married again. Never even came close. Jimmy and his father had a house in Seguin where they lived, but they also had places in Austin and San Antonio, mainly for convenience when traveling for business. But the one in Austin has been upgraded to a 4-bedroom apartment in a complex near Uday. My senior year, I lived there with 2 other guys, plus Jimmy sometimes. One day Jimmy, 3 of us, and some friends were hanging out at the complex pool drinking beer. Brett asked the question many people wanted to ask. A real friend would tell us the magic words you use to make all the girls agree to sleep with you right away. Between the 8 of us by the pool, there had already been a few 6-packs. Well, I hate to break it to you, Brett, but there are no magic words because every girl is different. Plus, you have to remember that they aren't stupid. So when you use your best memorized pickup line, you're only insulting them, and the only reason they'll even respond to you is because they want to despite what you said, not because of it. Plus, they're probably laughing at you internally. What would you think, Brett, if you were playing basketball on some court and a stranger came up to you and told you that you were better than Michael Jordan? Yes, I understand what you're saying. He would flatter me because he wanted something. Would such an obvious compliment make you feel good? Or would you respect him more if he just talked to you about what he wants? Yeah, I think so, but you can't just walk up to a girl and ask if she wants to sleep with you. Actually, Brett, I've seen a guy do just that and get laid. Granted, he's probably been punched in the face or kicked between the legs a lot more times than he's gotten laid. But I wouldn't be surprised if he's gotten laid more than you. You think? Because while girls won't admit it, even to themselves, they go to dance halls and bars for the same reasons we do. They've just had years of training to be good girls who can't admit it, want or do such things. Although this generation of girls is becoming less indoctrinated, some of them think that they can sometimes be easily accessible and generally good girls. But I won't comment or judge it because we're not talking about morals or courtship or romance. I'm not an expert on these things, and I don't want to be. I'm just talking about picking up toys in the dance hall or club. Girls who can, as you put it, give up and lie down. Another thing girls don't admit is that dancing is for them. Dancing is a vertical test ride for the possible horizontal dances that will follow. Even if the horizontal dance never happens, this test ride gives them a couple of things that toys really want. Don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to say that I understand what women want, because no man truly does. But because you asked for my magic words, I'll tell you my philosophy on picking up toys in the dance hall or club. Remember, I'm not giving you advice about romantic relationships. These are just tips for finding a fuck toy at the Long Branch Saloon on Friday or Saturday evening. It all depends on what the trial ride does for the woman, but remember that not all women are the same and want the same things. For example, not all trial runs are successful because of the best dancer. In fact, sometimes success goes to the worst dancer that makes her laugh or satisfies some other need or desire of hers. Test rides don't even have to be dancing, just something or someplace where she can get your attention just to her, one-on-one even, if it's in a crowd. The test drive is how well you give her what she wants. Money is important. I don't mean like a sugar daddy. What I mean is that people spend their money on things that are important to them. So in that sense, I'll ask the question, what do women spend on? Your money? Damn, it's easy, for clothes and cosmetics. Bingo, gar, on clothes and cosmetics. But why do they spend their money on these things? Is it just for vanity? Or to put it another way, what do they get from clothes and cosmetics that are so important to them? I thought about saying that to attract men, but everyone knows that women don't dress for men. They dress the way they like or the way other women like. True, Davy, but what I'm looking for is even more basic. Regardless of the style or who they're dressing for, why do they dress up when they go out? Well, I guess to get attention, get men to ask them to dance, buy them drinks, and flatter them. Close, at least the first and last. The middle two are byproducts of attention and flattery. But I really don't like the word flattery. It can have a negative or insincere connotation, causing a negative reaction in some women. Plus, it's not accurate. That's what they're looking for, in my opinion. I use the Michael Jordan example again. Telling Brett he's a better player than Michael Jordan is an obvious lie. We've all seen him play, and we know that's not true. Hey, I'm not that bad. Well, you're clearly not that good, and that's the whole point. When you tell some girl in a bar that she's the most beautiful woman you've ever seen, she knows it's a lie. So, by saying that, she understands that you are a liar or blind and live on the North Slope of Alaska. More than 90% of the flattery given in a club or dance hall is this kind of false or insincere flattery. Guys, we need to admit that from the moment of puberty, we were horny dogs. Just like girls who, from the moment of puberty, maturing are almost constantly attacked by all available men. They have become experts at recognizing insincere flattery, or, simply put, our crap. So why does our shit work? Here are a few things to pay special attention to. Our shit works because they want it to or allow it to work. Next time Davy says to a girl, "Your eyes are like liquid blue sapphires." Black, that phrase sucks and has been used 50 billion times in Austin alone. I doubt it's by more than a few green-eyed girls. But Davy's dance partner looks at him tenderly with her silver gray eyes and presses her soft breasts against his manly chest. Why? Because she wanted it, because his clumsy attempt at flattery gave her one of the two things she wants to have from your test drive. I like this word much more than flattery. So she clings to him to give him positive reinforcement and continues to give her what she wants. Validation and attention, those are the two magic words, Brett. Attention is even greater than validation. I think attention is the main weakness of any girl. They seem to desire it even more than money or love, especially girls in the dance hall environment. After all, that's why they dressed up and went out. This is doubly true for married women who just came to dance with the girls. So I have 3 steps to picking up toys in dance halls or clubs. The first is choice, the second is approach and confirmation, and the third is spotlight and agreement. Spotlight. What does the spotlight have to do with it? Well, Ernie, my man, this is your secret weapon, but I'll get to it later. Many women say that men are stupid, but what they really say is that men rarely understand the signals a woman uses or what she wants, which is incredibly simple for them or other women. We don't understand, therefore we are stupid. It's true, men are usually very blind to the signals that women give. The reason is very simple. We don't pay attention. But this is one of the basic skills that you need to use to pick up toys. Because women use signals, eye contact, and body language with much more dexterity and regularity than men ever thought possible, and they do it with intention and direct purpose. So you have to play their game. You don't have to win, just play. You college students and your bookish learning might want to look for a book on the psychology of body language. The only other way to learn is through observation, practice, and most importantly, attention. The first thing you do when you walk into a ballroom is look at who's looking at you. If they look at you for more than a couple of seconds, they're interested in you. Pay attention to their facial expressions and body language in those first seconds. Your intuition will tell you whether it's positive or negative. Those who frown, you forget and move on. The positive ones, you notice and from time to time check if they are looking at you. If they are, it means they are interested in you, hint. This is a signal. They will not stare at you. These will be short glances. Remember, good girls can't catch guys. Don't pick the prettiest girl or the one you think is exceptional. It's 10 p.m. or later on a Friday at the Long Branch Saloon and before 2 a.m. You want to have a toy handy and seek privacy. Pay attention to the girls who look at you with interest. They are already half there. So you need to play their game of glances of interest. In the early stages, don't look too long or too hard at them. But at the same time, don't be too shy or insecure. So when you turn away, don't look at the wall or TV, show that you are doing something else, for example, talking to someone or drinking. One of the first few glances shouldn't be an immediate turn away. Appreciate her fully, but not with greed or lust, and for God's sake, don't stare at her breasts. Make a full, respectful inspection from top to bottom, showing that you like what you see. Finish this look with a pleasant smile, but still keep your eyes away. Continue this little game of teasing glances until you choose the toy you want to move on to the next step. But still, at this early stage of choosing, don't stop at just one toy. Pay attention to everyone else who has been looking at you and continues to look at you, or anyone else who has started looking. A little competition between them is good for you, and believe me, they can spot female competition in the blink of an eye. But a few don'ts to remember. Don't pick the prettiest toy in the bar unless she's giving you a lot of attention. Most guys in the bar will probably be after her, so she'll have plenty of choice. But being so pretty and in demand, she may not want to choose at all. She can choose anywhere and anytime. In short, it will take a lot of time and effort. On a Friday night at the Long Branch Saloon, you're not looking for someone to take home to mom or to make beautiful babies with. You want to get laid, and the prettiest toy in the place is a maybe at best, with plenty of time and effort required. It also takes a lot of effort from those who looked at you negatively. I heard a statement once that took me a little time to realize. Most women decide in the first 2 or 3 seconds whether they would sleep with you or not. No, horny dogs, it's would get laid, not get laid. We have to admit that we do the same thing, usually even faster. One look and we're already in the up or down position. But the differences between men and women are radical here. But a woman who looked at you and rejected you will take a lot of work and a long time to change her mind, maybe. Maybe she will, but definitely not on a Friday night at Long Branch. Oh, sorry guys, beer number 8 is trying to distract me. So, where was I? Oh, yes, step 2. Approach and confirmation. Approach is easy, but confirmation is hard. And guess what, guys? All you need is attention. So, after you've made your choice and before you approach her, you need to observe her carefully for confirmation. In other words, you need to find something, a few things that you can sincerely compliment her, and no weird moves like great breasts or ass. Sometimes I use this technique. If a woman feels uncomfortable in a blouse or skirt she's wearing, she'll tug or adjust it to try to make it less revealing. Complimenting her on her clothes will give her validation, even if it's just the clothes she's wearing. She put it on. But this is a start, and it opens the door. Lovely ears, a long neck, or a walk are examples that can work. But stay away from eyes, legs, buttocks, or breasts, as this will immediately sound suspicious and insincere, and certainly not original. Like I said, the approach is simple. You just have to make it sincere and realistic, but most importantly, simple. Don't try to use your best memorized pickup line or some long, flattering speech. Often, just holding out your hand in an invitation to dance is enough, or a polite request for a dance. If you played the game correctly with little teasing glances expressing your interest, she will already know what you want. But politeness and manners are never wrong, especially chivalrous ones. Once you've decided she's the one, it's time to turn up the intensity. That's where the spotlight comes in, Ernie, because I call it the spotlight. There's a lot more to it than being the center of attention. When I say spotlight, 2 small video images come to mind. A black and white film from the Second World War. I think it was called the Battle of Britain or something like that. The Germans were conducting night bombings over England. When the British heard they were coming, they turned on the air raid sirens and searchlights. These large searchlights were shining upward for hundreds or thousands of feet, trying to illuminate the German planes for the British anti-aircraft gunners. The searchlights were powerful enough to shine upward for thousands of feet, of course. The second image is of the red carpet at a movie premiere, at the Oscars or something like that. They had spotlights pointed at the sky, but it started to rain. Someone turned the camera, and there was a brief moment with a spotlight in the rain. Most of the rain evaporated before it reached the glass covering the spotlight. Those raindrops that hit the glass hissed and disappeared, as if they had hit a hot frying pan. These are two images that illustrate the attitude required for the next step. It is the same confirmation and attention brought to the maximum. Full attention and complete focus only on the toy you have chosen. Your attention is so focused that if another girl dancing next to you takes off top, you won't even look. Continue to dance for a few moments after the band stops playing, as if you are completely engrossed only in her and are surprised that the music has stopped. Now is the time to continue touching her, her lower back, her shoulder, her arm, her hair, and the back of her neck. Intimate touching, but no weird moves like grabbing breasts or buttocks. Acknowledge, as if you can't stop touching her, but pay attention. If touching makes her feel uncomfortable, back off a little, but don't stop. Slowly increase the contact as she becomes more comfortable with it. Take your attention away from her dancing or clothing, even from her body. Focus on her face and eyes, as if you are trying to look inside her. When you feel like it's time to kiss her, or she looks like she wants to kiss you, do what I call the kiss approach. Move in to kiss her, but stop an inch away. Let her close the distance and complete the kiss. In other words, make her invest in a kiss. Same with final agreement or closing the deal. Take control of the decision by asking her a direct question. Don't be a jerk and ask if she wants to go have sex. Something like, do you want to continue this somewhere more private? Or even a simple, your place or mine, but not something like, do you want to get some coffee? Going out for coffee or looking at your drawings may be a euphemism for sex for you. But for her, it may seem like just an invitation for a cup of coffee, thus sending her confusing or mixed signals. But more importantly, it gives her an emotional outlet or mental opportunity to say yes later. If she says yes and is invested, she's less likely to change her mind. Plus, it's easier to say yes on the dance floor at Long Branch than in a room at Motel 6. A couple of things to remember. You've all gotten wrong phone numbers from girls at some point, but they'll take your number if they're even thinking about going on a date. They don't want some guy calling them at any time of the day or night. Here's the key. They don't want him to have anything to do with their lives. We have to do the same thing, not just with phone numbers. Don't take a toy or girlfriend to your apartment or dorm for one night. It gives her a connection to your life that she can use to show up to you anytime she wants. Maybe she thinks it's sending her a message that you're open to further contact. It also gives you a little distance if she gets clingy or crazy. There is one rule: never forgotten, never broken, and always respected. Without protection, there is no love, an ironclad rule. If you wake up in the morning next to a girl and cannot find a condom, immediately call the clinic for an STD test. Toy says you don't need a condom because she's on birth control. No, besides the possibility of illness, she may really want to have control over her baby. A lot of girls here in college are looking for an easy life with a rich student. Toy says she's a virgin and on birth control, so you don't need condoms. Nonsense. You can get AIDS from a virgin. Roman IV drug use or bad blood transfusion are obvious examples, so don't take any chances. Another thing is alcohol, especially in a closed environment like this college, the girls say. The same is true for girls. You don't want to pick up a girl who's completely drunk. First of all, she might be screaming about being assaulted in the morning. The other reason is that being that drunk, she'll have terrible sex. If you're that desperate, find a professional. You'll get more bang for your buck and a lot less hassle. Remember I said girls talk to other girls. If one girl lies and screams about assault, and even if you are proven innocent, or even if she doesn't report it or tell anyone besides your girlfriends, you are an abuser, so that every girl who has ever heard this rumor, and each of them will tell 10 other girls who will swear that it is true, and your love life will be over. You can pack up and move to Alaska. Sometimes I go out to San Antonio or Seguin and start encountering different types of toys than these students here in Austin. So, I'll give you college kids one more piece of advice. You're going to get married, that's what college students do. Someday, your little wifey will want to have a girls' night out. You need to decisively and quickly nip this in the bud. I hope you can do this and build on it before you have kids. Because the different types of toys I started to encounter are married. Even at 21 and 22, young wives go to bars and dance halls for their girls' night out. Remember that the girls on the test drive don't even admit it to themselves. Remember what they want from a test drive. Validation and attention. Only on girls' night out they want it from someone else. Not you. But they will sit there and lie to you and themselves, saying that it's completely innocent and they're not going to cheat on you. And they probably don't. They are so hypocritical and in such deep denial that they don't even see it. Hypocritical. Yes, they are hypocritical, and I will give you an example. We've all seen a couple at the mall where the hubby was looking at some girl's breasts and ass. His wife tears a stripe off him in a 10-second glance. You know, when he gets home, she'll turn into an iceberg, and he passed out for a week or two just because he looked. 99 out of 100 women believe that their husband should never look at another woman with admiration. They have enough self-doubt that they think that if their husband even looks at another woman, he will love them less, and they can't stand it. The other part of girls' night out is the girls who drag your wife along with them. They are not your friends at all. In fact, they are your enemies, and you need to get them out of your life as quickly as possible. Whoever they are, here's a little story that happened to me in San Antonio. I chose a small toy to wear at night. What I didn't count on was the help I received from the girls at her table. There was an older woman who would have been about her mother's age, one girl about her age, and one girl maybe a year or two younger. They were well lubricated, so to speak. As soon as I approached the toy, they began to encourage it, rather rudely. Needless to say, it didn't take long to get her to leave with me. God, she was ecstatic in bed, but she was married. Later, when I asked who the girls at her table were, she showed no shame when she said that the oldest woman was her mother-in-law and the other two were her daughters-in-law. So, if you can't count on your mother or sisters to keep little wifey in the right position during their girls' night out, can you count on her friends or co-workers? Hell no. The only time I met a married woman, or the only time she was encouraged at the table by saying that they had her and her husband's back. This seems to be the new attitude that women in bars have been talking about. These men have always cheated on women, so they have every right to act a little strange. For all the years they have cheated on women, they want to be equal plus. Although in their personal situation, hubby has never cheated on them, and he sure as hell better not do it. Because she would divorce him in a heartbeat, take her children, and take him to the damn cleaners. These women feel like it's an automatic win for the mother in court, and that's pretty much it. They're just getting payback for all their sisters. It's just an excuse to justify what they want. Same as that white guilt I heard about. Because of slavery in the South in the 1700s and 1800s, every white person in America owes every African American an easier life. Even though the African American who expounds on white guilt immigrated to America 2 years ago from Rwanda, plus the white guy he's swearing at, their great-great-grandparents immigrated through Ellis Island from Germany. They were traveling straight from a boat to a train that would take them across the country to a homestead in freaking Montana. The great-great-grandparents probably never saw half a dozen African Americans in their lifetime, and not one of them was a slave. One of the tenets of my life is free will. Everyone has free will. They simply have to pay for their free will by accepting their own consequences. The key point here is the implications for a lot of free will, no one else's. I don't believe in original sin, as the priests teach. Just because Eve bit the fruit of the tree in the Garden of Eden, every woman has a debt of sin before she is born. White guilt. Yes, this is strange. Syrian Christianity has taught since the 5th or 6th century that the mark of Cain was black skin. This is also found in the writings of the Jesuits, as well as in the ancient Protestant writings, and of course, in the writings of the Southern Baptists. These scriptures were used to justify slavery, so I think the mark of Cain is black guilt. Ah, damn. Now beer number 10 is confusing me and leading me astray. I'm not racist in any way. The guys in my crews get the same pay and treatment whether they're black, white, or green. But they also don't get more pay or opportunities because they're black, white, or green. So, back to collecting toys and having a girls' party. So I have another story for you. One woman told me that she only goes on stage because she loves to dance and her husband doesn't. She tried to convince me that going out to Long Branch was the only way to dance. I didn't say anything, but mentally it's called nonsense. If she wanted to dance, she could have found other ways. Damn it, dance naked in the bedroom for your husband, or in the living room with a bottle of tequila and the stereo on, or go to a fitness club and sign up for a Zumba class. But the best solution may be to take a Zumba class. Hubby to some sort of Arthur Murray studio and teach him how to dance. But I knew she wouldn't do it because in such situations there is a lack of approval and attention, along with the sexual excitement coming from kinky cowboys during a dance test drive. Another time, a woman told me that her husband loved it when she went to a bachelorette party. She even said it strengthened their marriage. He loved it. He said it was the best sex they ever had. Well, if passive sex and intimacy is the best he's ever had, then she sure didn't care about her housework and hubby. Secondhand sex and intimacy. Yeah, because even if she didn't sleep with the cowboy, hubby would still be getting passive sex. Because while she was rocking her husband's world, in her mind she was imagining a cowboy, making it sex secondhand. Plus, whatever intimacy they shared later probably also dreamed of a cowboy. So, college boys, heed my warning, and when little wifey wants to throw a girl's party, shut it down hard and fast. She is lonely after a divorce. If she still wants to give up and go, throw her to the curb. Because at one of the girls' night out dances, she's going to run into a cowboy like me. Damn it, Jimmy, you're 21 or 22 years old. You've never been married like the rest of us. Why do you think you understand so much about marriage and how married women behave? Well, Gar, remember what I said you would have to do to collect toys at the bar? Well, I do the same thing with other things. Take note. I pay attention to the married men on my teams when they complain about their wives, the guy on the stool whining to the sympathetic bartender, or the guy on the next stool. I listen to the women at the next table when they think they won't be heard. Yes, I'm paying attention. Plus, you don't have to put your hand on the stove to know it's hot. As I listened to Jimmy, I realized that I had watched him carry out his plan and collect toys for years, and he had never let me down. The fact that Jimmy broke it all down into a step-by-step, organized, formal plan bothered me and made me sad. Very sad. But that day, I didn't really understand why, and it didn't take any mental effort for me to pull myself out of the alcoholic haze. I just felt sad, very sad. But his mention of Syriac Christianity and the mark of Cain struck me. I never thought he was so inquisitive and well-read. Many people thought of Jimmy as a stud, a big man and a blue-collar worker with a high school education, and perhaps not the smartest person. However, I knew something else. Jimmy was smart. I just calmed down and started thinking about him the same way as everyone else. But later, after Carrie, my more mature understanding realized why I was upset by Jimmy's monologue, because of Queen Elizabeth's teaching and Jimmy's all-nothing love and decisions regarding Bethany. So much of Jimmy's personal philosophy and understanding of women, racism, and morality was learned in all the wrong places and from the wrong people. His father, the toys, and the men who frequented the bars and dance halls. The thoughts he received from my mom or other people like Garrett's father were such a small part of his life, no matter how much he valued them. A few years later, I asked Jimmy if he was trying to match the number of women Magic Johnson had been with. He said, "No, hell, I did it for a living." I asked because I thought Jimmy's number was 3 digits, and the first digit wasn't a 1 or even a 2. When Jimmy was 24 years old, his father had an accident at work, which became the proverbial straw that broke the camel's back, and pushed the eternal cowboy into the background. So Jimmy had to take over the leadership of the entire company. I even signed some papers, just in case. It wasn't a job or anything. It gave me the opportunity to step in and do something if I really had to. When Jimmy was about 30, one day I noticed that he was preoccupied. I asked him what was going on. He told me he was being sued for paternity and child support. I asked if he thought it was his. I found it difficult to understand his answer. I don't really think so. I always wear protection. Besides, it's a little difficult for me to recognize the girl. I mean, she's an acquaintance, but I'm not sure if I slept with her or if she's the type who. I was around me when I met another girl. You mean you don't recognize her? How far has she come? She's 3 months old, and that's part of what worries me. While this is possible, she does not allow any DNA testing to be done until the baby is born. So I have to sit and wait. Plus, my lawyer recommended that I pay her medical bills before the birth. So I do that plus give her a small stipend to live on. Money doesn't bother me. This expectation and uncertainty that she is trying to rob me, I just can't be sure I remember her. 3 months ago, and you can't remember if you slept with her? Are you used to 4-digit numbers yet? He laughed and winked, telling me he didn't think so. 6 months later, he came back and told me it wasn't his, but he intended to continue receiving a monthly stipend until she got back on her feet, but not for more than a year. When I was 24 years old, I married Carrie. Then, when the kids started coming, I think we kind of pulled away from Jimmy. Unintentionally, my life went in a different direction, but Jimmy's life remained the same. No, we didn't avoid him, and I still saw him often. Uncle Jimmy was the man. He became an uncle and godfather to all our children. Both grandmothers jokingly complained that they could not spoil their grandchildren as much as Jimmy. But Jimmy and I never went to bars again, and I didn't just hang out with him. I was worried about what he was drinking. I knew Jimmy was a functional alcoholic and how he could be anything less. He never got drunk or got a Dewey, and he never shirked his duties the next day. However, if he was not at work with his father or my children, then he was playing somewhere in a bar with toys. His toy now has a 3-digit number, or at least that's what I thought of it. It's probably unrealistic, but because of Bethany's all-nothing approach, there wasn't much else in his life. Romeo lost his Juliet and never looked for another. Carrie loved Jimmy like a brother, almost a beloved brother. But she helped me understand some things about Jimmy, and some of them drove me further away from Jimmy. We never spent time together again. Life got in the way too easily. Any camping, hunting, or fishing trip we went on always involved teaching the boys what they needed to learn and nothing more. Carrie helped me realize that even though I thought I knew and understood why Jimmy went down the road he didn't have to stay there. Some kids from the projects and barrios stayed away from gangs and drugs. Even though they had a bad lot in life, they tried to take the high road. They didn't take guns into the car to drive by. Even though their lives had given them this choice, they made a different one, and Jimmy might have too. In a sense, Jimmy chose where he wanted to be. Jimmy was a stud, always one that men admired, even idolized, and some even tried to imitate. He accumulated his own approval and attention from women, everything he ever wanted and more. He was an influential businessman, and he did not need to share his achievements with anyone if he did not want to. Carrie called Jimmy a hypocritical romantic misogynist who had closed off every possible outlet for his romantic nature except Bethany. Then he locked her in too. Nerd, geek, or idiot. I always confuse nerds and geeks. I thought of one as a very shy, very intelligent, almost antisocial person. I imagined the other as a stocky kid who always had a bag of potato chips, a video game, and a can of soda on hand. Like I said, I confused the two, but damn, I know we had one in high school. Ernie Johnson, and he graduated a year after Jimmy and me. It was not half a bubble below the plumb line. But maybe 14 or 18 is enough to not be crazy, but not quite normal either. Ernie had two things he was good at: driving fast and gossiping. Ernie lived for these two and became one of the lucky ones who found a job that strangely suited both of them, an ambulance driver. So, from the knock on my door one morning at 4:30 and Ernie's voice on the other side, I knew something really bad had happened. Ernie wanted to tell me a story, and she couldn't wait. He'd barely finished stuttering and stammering enough to go, "It's about Jimmy," before Carrie had put on her robe enough to bring me mine. I jumped out of bed wearing only my boxers. They received a 911 call shortly before 2 a.m., reporting shots fired. Ernie said there were enough police cars there that he was having a hard time finding a place to park the ambulance outside the house. Red and blue lights illuminated a 2-block radius. The first thing he heard was, "Officer down." A police officer was shot dead, and this was the reason for such a violent reaction. Due to the shots, there was a delay in allowing paramedics and Ernie to enter the scene. Ernie said he knew from the officers' conversations that someone had fired the final shot as they pulled up. That's why they had to clear the scene before letting paramedics in. When Ernie first got there, they found 2 dead men and 1 seriously wounded woman. One of the men was Jimmy, who was shot twice in the back. The other was dressed in a police uniform. Suicide, a shot rang out as the police arrived. The woman was trapped under Jimmy's body. Ernie said he listened to the officers' suggestions while helping stabilize the woman and preparing her for transport. The preliminary assumption was this: the husband came home and found them in bed together. Jimmy rose slightly on his knees. Ernie thought Jimmy might not have even realized he was dead, both shots hitting him in the heart. The woman was trapped under Jimmy as her husband hit her on the knees twice and scrunched up his face. But even through the tears, I understood his reasoning. He didn't want her to dance and be beautiful again. Ernie said one of the other officers knew the dead husband. He informed everyone that the couple had a little daughter between 1 and 2 years old. Fortunately, she was not at home at the time of the incident. The police suggested that it was the daughter who caused the husband to leave the woman alive. A small child needs at least one parent, and in childhood he needs a mother even more. The husband called 911. He then pulled up a chair and sat next to her while he waited for emergency services. When he heard the police arriving outside, he shot himself. They figured this out from the time difference between the 911 call and the last shot. "Hey, honey, Father Donnelly looks like he's finishing his sermon. You should probably come back very soon." "Yes, thank you, love. I'll be ready in just a few more minutes." "You are a big liar. You're no closer to being ready than when you sat here and set your ass on fire. Fool, you are lying to your wife in vain." "Yes, my wife, Carrie. And I have Jimmy to thank for that, too." A couple of years after college, Jimmy and I were hanging out at Long Branch and doing our usual toy shopping. I turned my head to check on Jimmy's progress on the dance floor. My eyes are locked on little Angel. A fiery flash ran down her back to her perfect ass, an elfin face with a scattering of freckles and bright green eyes that were glued to me from across the room. The checklist of my most perfect woman that I didn't even know I had already made. Checked all the boxes in 2 beats of my racing heart. Those bright green eyes were shining because they were looking at me with a smile illuminated by Jimmy's spotlight, which never failed. My head returned to the table and my bottle of beer. My world turned pale, and the noise of the bar disappeared into silence. My world narrowed down to this bottle of beer as I began to tear small pieces of paper off the label. I always hated people who did that. At that moment, I intensely, passionately hated, truly hated my best friend, because his spotlight never failed and little pieces of paper kept falling. The hand on my shoulder made me turn around quickly because I didn't want it to touch me. Shocked, I looked up and saw a fiery flash and bright green eyes. "Davy, I think this girl must be brain damaged and vision impaired because she says she wants to meet you." Jimmy's voice trailed off because she didn't say anything, and neither could I. "Ah, Carrie, her name is Carrie." The silence fell again for a few heartbeats, maybe a few heartbeats. It could have been hours. I didn't know and I didn't care. "Carrie, this dumbass is named Davy, and he's my best friend my whole life." He's the best man I know, maybe the best man in the world. The heartbeat and silence pounded again for a while as I looked into the glowing green eyes, and the green eyes looked back. Take care of him, and he'll take care of you, Jimmy broke the silence. While I was still looking up into those mesmerizing green eyes, Jimmy's large dark silhouette appeared at the edge of my vision and leaned towards my ear. Do you remember B and your turn to kiss? My nod was almost microscopic. Well, we're even now. And I understood what he meant. Jimmy's dark silhouette moved away from me while I was still looking up at a video that I had seen and thought was incredibly beautiful. A dark winter night in the frozen northern territories of Canada. It was beautiful because of the flowing, meandering river overhead and the shimmering, swirling little streams of the black night and the iridescent green of the northern lights, whose color palette never came close to the beauty of the green I was looking into. This green one also had swirling currents of emotions and feelings. It was surprising that I could read them easily. A small hand snuck into mine. 19 years old, 2 boys and a girl, countless dogs and cats. 1 pony and a horse. 3 houses, t-ball, dance classes, gymnastics, soccer, basketball, creaking violins, wailing guitars, and a drum kit blaring in our garage. A fleet of used cars and 5 jobs, 3 for me and 2 for her. Well, 3 for her mother. In this most important sense, her hand has never left mine, and mine will never, ever leave hers. We danced and partied with Jimmy for about a year after we got married. But one night began to change that. We both watched as Jimmy led the toy out the door of Long Branch. Carrie's mood dropped. What happened, dear? I know her, Davy. I don't mean she's my friend, but she's more than just an acquaintance. What's wrong with that? Well, she's been married less than 2 years and has a 6-month-old baby. You know, Jimmy always said they're single, white, and over 21, so he won't judge or reject their choices. Here's the thing, Davy, I also know she's being treated for postpartum depression, so she might not be in the right mind to make a choice. So we left Long Branch to catch up with them, only to see the taillights of Jimmy's truck disappear. We tried, but knowing Jimmy, his cell phone would be turned off. During his attention and acknowledgement stages, cell phone interruption was not an option. Later, Jimmy and Carrie discussed everything and came to an agreement. They agreed that when we are with him, he will not take married toys, but he didn't promise not to do it when we weren't with him. This started a discussion between Carrie and I that led to our distance from partying with Jimmy. But Carrie soon became pregnant with our first boy, Jacob, and the drinking and partying stopped anyway. Damn, I really need to get there. But I'm no closer to knowing what to say than I was yesterday. Standing here at the pulpit, I almost panic. But looking at the crowd, and it really is a crowd, I begin to see and recognize the faces of Jimmy's friends, our friends. My eyes landed on Bethany, her father, and Queen Elizabeth. I feel my face harden and my eyes become sharp. Bethany sees this and her head hangs, I think, in shame. As my eyes continue to move, I see faces that recognize the story of Queen Elizabeth and Bethany, and my smile turns predatory. Maybe I can. But my eyes catch on the exhausted figure of Papa Barrett. Sitting next to him is Jimmy's mother, Caroline, and next to her is Rose. The little girl who was so important to Jimmy was now grown up. She must be aware of the cause of this tragedy and Jimmy's role in it. But I don't think she knows anything about who Jimmy was. My eyes catch on another pair of faces, and I decide what I'm going to do. I'm sure we've all heard about the reasons for the tragedy that brought us all here today, but I don't think that's the reason I'm here. Looking down at Rose, I wink. I know there are people here who may not know the rest of what Jimmy was like me. That will be my goal today. My eyes move to a pair of faces I noticed. Lyle, do you and Mary still have that little blue Honda? It was a rhetorical question, so I didn't answer and continued. One Friday afternoon, Jimmy noticed a small blue Honda on the side of the road. The hood was up and smoke was coming out around the figure of a woman, our friend named Mary. When Jimmy pulled over, he saw her 2 small children in the back seat. One look under the hood was enough, and Jimmy knew it was deadly. Oil and metal on the ground is not a roadside repair. Jimmy put Mary and her children in his truck and drove them home. Jimmy realized that Mary had no help because her husband was a military man stationed in the Middle East. On the way home, Jimmy made several phone calls. The first was to a towing company to tow the car on a flatbed and take it to Mary's garage. The rest of the calls were to me and another friend of ours, Earl. Yes, I see you there too, Earl. They told us to bring our toolboxes as soon as possible, and Earl brought his engine lift too. Then three of us started pulling the engine out of Mary's Honda. Jimmy wasn't much help. He was calling every auto parts store in Austin and San Antonio trying to find a new short block and gasket set for their car. Around 8 or 9 p.m., he drove to Austin by getting one guy to stay there until Jimmy got the engine. A little after 11, Earl and I pulled the engine out and cleaned everything out. We took everything we needed off the old engine and put it in the back of Earl's truck for disposal. Then Earl and I went home for a couple of hours of sleep. Jimmy hadn't returned yet. Saturday morning, they found me and Jimmy in Mary's garage again, only this time the new engine was lying on the floor waiting for us. We didn't start right away because Mary had omelets, potatoes, and coffee ready for us. A little after 10, Manuel, another friend of ours, arrived. Hola, amigo. I nodded towards him where he was sitting. But Manuel worked at a Honda dealership in town, and Jimmy hired him to make sure we got the car together correctly. Jimmy made a few phone calls and disappeared again, while Manuel and I were finishing the final steps. About 5 o'clock in the evening, Manuel and I washed up. When we finished, we were invited into Mary's backyard, where we found our wives and children, dogs and cats, plus Earl and his family. Jimmy went to the delicatessen and brought out huge trays of fried chicken, spaghetti, garlic bread, and green salad, as well as potato salad, hot dogs and buns for the kids, and several large refrigerators stocked with ice, beer, and soda. On Sunday morning, Blue Honda and Mary took their children to church as usual, to light a candle and pray for Dad. A few months later, Lyle returned home. He called Jimmy and me to meet in Long Branch. Immediately, he ordered a beer and handed Jimmy an envelope with a lot of money. He immediately began thanking us for everything we did to help his wife. Jimmy stood up, pushed back his chair, and stood on it. He did what everyone had seen him do before, put 2 fingers in his mouth and whistled so loud that it could be heard in Oklahoma. It was loud enough to drown out the music and everyone at the bar. Hey, everyone, I'd like to introduce you to Marine Sergeant Lyle Jacobson. He just returned from serving in our country in the sandbox. For anyone who doesn't know anything about military stuff, that means the Middle East, where you get shot at. While he was serving our country, I had a small opportunity to help his wife and children. Now he came here today with this envelope of money to pay me back. Should I take it? Heck no, no, or several other negative remarks were emphatically voiced from the crowd. Jimmy Weekly, or Hart, saluted, Sergeant Jacobson, thank you for your service. The response from the crowd was as positive as the previous one had been negative. Thanks everyone, get back to the fun. And Jimmy sat down. Buy me another beer and we'll be even. Jimmy said as he handed the envelope back to Lyle. I see Robert Benissen there too. Bob worked at Barrett and Son Roofing for many years. A few years ago, a very minor fall turned into a major one when it shouldn't have been. Jimmy always made sure his crews had all the necessary safety equipment to OSHA standards and even more. That day, Bob's equipment broke down and he was seriously injured. Jimmy paid all the hospital bills and deductibles that their insurance didn't cover. He made up the difference between workers' compensation payments and Bob's full salary for the entire time Bob was on sick leave. Jimmy performed a metallurgy test to determine the cause of the failure of the hook in Bob's harness. When it was proven that the hook was faulty, Jimmy hired Bob's lawyer to file a personal injury claim against the manufacturer of the harness. Also, While all of this was going on, Jimmy paid for and signed Bob up for an online course on accounting and payroll. This was a job that Bob returned to when he recovered enough to return to work. I see Marla Stewart. No, wait, that's Marla Brown now. Marla was one of the Danes in distress that Jimmy saved on the road. However, her road rescue was much easier than Mary's, just a flat tire. But while changing it, Jimmy noticed that the spare tire was in poor condition. While examining the other tires, he saw why the puncture had occurred, and another was imminent. Marla was a single widow with a young son. Apparently, it was not easy for her. So, over her objections, Jimmy took her car to Costco and installed 4 new tires and a spare on it. He also started picking up her little son Teddy like a big brother to play catch with him or take him to the practice cages. Even took him camping and fishing a few times, just temporarily until Marla finds a good man who wouldn't mind taking his young son along. Looks like she's found one. Jimmy was a very good person. Damn. Oh God, I'm so glad it's over. Not only did I have to speak, I was also one of the porters. The long walk down the aisle of the church really hit me harder than having to talk about it. I guess it was because I was looking forward to the next journey I would have to take with Jimmy, the journey to the grave. So here I am, standing again in the hot South Texas sun, waiting to be taken to the cemetery. I'm waiting behind a couple of other porters to get into the long black limousine reserved for us. Oh fuck, the taste in my mouth turned to shit, and the bile in my stomach began to boil. All because I see something approaching me. Yeah, coming, because I don't call her Queen Elizabeth anymore. I call her Queen Elizabeth Roman II, the damn ocean liner. To say that the years have added a little to Queen Elizabeth is an understatement. She's closer to 300 pounds than 200. She's never been a beauty, but now she's a little pig face with pursed, disgruntled lips and a gray, unhealthy complexion. I've known you and Jimmy for a long time, Davy. I wanted to express my feelings. I spit in her face, right between her little pig eyes. I don't want your damn condolences. I don't want anything from you. You're a big part of the reason Jimmy is lying there in a coffin. All your dating rules, your screaming and tantrums, your manipulations ruined 2 good people, didn't they? In your royal ego, Jimmy was never good enough for your Princess Mini-Me, was he? Yeah, it must really bite your ass knowing that Jimmy could buy and sell any of those acceptable husbands. Yep, 3 divorces and the search for a 4th husband. You're proud of what you taught them. You have 3 grandchildren, 1 white, 1 brown, and 1 black. I'm not racist, but I know it's definitely biting your ass. Must be you enjoy listening to other old women whispering behind your back about how messed up your life is. The only thing I want from you is your damn absence. Now fuck off and die. I jumped into the back seat of the limousine and slammed the door. Leave, get me out of here before I do something really stupid. Oh damn, Carrie and Kelly are really going to kick my ass. Yes, Kelly, my red-haired, green-eyed, freckled Irish daughter who has the same temperament as her mother. It's all sweetness and light and rainbows until you piss them off. Then all hell breaks loose. A slight turn of the head, and I look back at the place where Queen Elizabeth Roman II was still standing. I can barely make out her gaping mouth as we walk away, but in my mind I'm giggling as I imagine my spit still dripping from her face. But what I see behind her makes me even more happy. Bethany and her father stood in an embrace 50 feet from Queen Elizabeth, and quickly moved away from her. 3 days later, the letter appeared in my mailbox. Davy, I know we haven't been close for a long time, but I have to thank you. Jimmy's death hit me hard and left me emotionally unsettled. But when you attacked my mother, the things you said became a revelation to me. They made me start looking at my life from a different perspective. I love my mom, and she has always been one of the main forces and influences in my life. But perhaps because of this love, I never looked at what she did from the other side. Looking at this in light of what you said, I realize that you are probably right. In her selfishness, she hurt both Jimmy and me. I decided to view Jimmy's death as a wake-up call for my life. I'm in the process of finding a therapist to help me make real changes in my life. Thank you, Davy. B. Less than a week later, I found myself again staring at another envelope with the return addresses of Delaney, and Woodworth, the law firm that Barrett and Son Roofing used, and I was expecting this letter. Years ago, I signed some papers that would allow me to help the company in the event of an emergency. I think this can be considered an emergency. I didn't read the wording of the signed documents too carefully. I trusted Jimmy and signed where I was told. Now I hoped I hadn't made a mistake, hoped it wouldn't take time away from my family and my work. The letter was a request for my presence at the meeting, date and time included. The first person to offer condolences was a professionally dressed secretary. In a typical lawyer's office with black leather, dark wood, and bookcases, Mr. Jonathan Woodworth expressed his. However, sitting at his wooden desk that resembled a tank and a matching chair, the height of the back and the solidity of the chair resembled a throne. Plus, my black leather and dark wood client chair was very comfortable, just significantly smaller. This configuration made his negotiating style clear, and I hoped that our conversation today would not go in that direction. If all my clients prepared as well as the Barretts, my job would be much easier, but also perhaps unnecessary. I hope our preliminary meeting today will not take up too much of your time, Mr. Kenny Kramer, but also Mr. Barrett, and I understood that there would be a transition period following this meeting. Therefore, Mr. Benlifer Barrett has made sure that my services are available to you for questions or until you can select your own attorney. Basic information needed for today's preliminary. The meeting is in this letter. With these words, he handed me the envelope. It was one of the standard law firm envelopes, as it had their name and address printed and embossed on it. There was no postmark on it, just my name and Jimmy's handwriting in the center. I did not expect or was prepared for such a direct message. My emotions were mixed up and seething as I looked at this letter and began to open it. Sadness, worry, reluctant curiosity, and fear were just a few of these emotions. Davy, I have always considered you my brother, and you have been a better brother, a partner, a better friend than a person could ever expect or deserve. You were a better brother to me than any real sibling. You've always had my back. No matter if I was right or wrong, you've had my back since we could barely walk. It is impossible to express my gratitude or thank you enough. If you are reading this letter, it means I am dead. Although Mr. Brennan Woodworth has all the necessary legal and formal documents, this letter is basically my last will and testament. My last wish, everything I had, is now yours. You are my only beneficiary. This will not contain any codicils or conditions. Everything is now yours to do with whatever you want. I thought about not writing anything else in this letter because I trust you to do the right thing. But I will include a few requests, and they are just that, requests. If for some strange reason Pa is still alive, his finances and medical care are already taken care of separately. Check on him occasionally, he'll love it. With the company, you can do anything. If you sell it, I ask, if possible, that my employees be given a reasonable period of time to settle their affairs so that they can still feed their families without undue hardship. Unbeknownst to her, I have been watching Rose's life like an older brother, and I ask you to do the same. But she never tried to be a part of my life, so she doesn't deserve any part of this property. It's only yours. Family is not necessarily blood, and blood is not necessarily family. I know you blame Bethany for a lot of things, but I've been following her life too. I only ask that if necessary, do what you think is right or what I would do if she needed help. Although I was never close to being a good role model, you never shielded your children from me. So they are the closest thing I will ever have to having my own children, and your family is the closest thing to a normal family I will ever have. This is another impossible task for which I cannot thank you enough. Mr. Brennan Woodworth has deeds to 3 educational trust funds. I hope these funds will be enough for children to study at any university or achieve any level of education they want. You will control these funds, so if one of the children does not want to pursue higher education, you can release the funds for them in any way you see fit. Davy, you know part of my philosophy has always been free will. I believe that everyone has the right to free will. even to the extent that they can make their own mistakes. They just have to accept the consequences too. I am not clairvoyant and cannot see the future, but I understand that my death will likely be one of these consequences and, to some extent, inevitable. I'm okay with that, but I also understand how twisted the human mind can be. You can take some blame on yourself for my actions and death. Don't. Leave me with my mistakes and consequences because nothing you could have done would have changed anything. It was my own free will. One of the differences between us, Davy, is our approach to work. Because of what happened in my life, I lived for work other than you. That was the majority of what I had left. But because of your family, you work to live. My hope is that this property and money will give your family independence and greater freedom to exercise their free will in any way they wish. You're the captain, Davy, so take your ship wherever you want. One thing I regret a little is that Pa and I deceived you and hid a few things. When it became obvious that Pa would not be able to continue working, we did a lot of restructuring of the company. As Pa said, the IRS is a persistent and greedy bureaucracy, especially in the case of inheritance. Our restructuring was aimed at minimizing the financial impact of the Pope relinquishing ownership without having to pay any inheritance tax and bringing you in as owner. Yes, ever since you signed those papers, you've been part owner of Barrett and Son Roofing, just quiet and unaware. I hope as this property settles, you will understand that we tried to make this a good deal for both you and me. Our main goal was that if anything happened to any of us, the remaining family members would be able to help quickly and easily. Another reason we did it this way was because I know you, Davy. You wouldn't take free money, a free life, or even what you perceived as a free job. However, we needed to create a way to cover any unforeseen circumstances. Besides, you loved your engineering and proved that you could provide for and raise your family on your own. So we left you alone and just made a hidden airbag for both of us. Thus, we set up the company as an and/or partnership so that the inheritance would not be considered an inheritance or a monetary gain. But as Pa said, the IRS is a persistent and greedy bureaucracy, and sometimes their decisions benefit only themselves, or so it seems. As this property is settled, you will see that my affairs are somewhat confused, and for good reason. Apart from those educational trusts, and because you never received a salary as a co-owner, I slowly added an appropriate amount of money to a Cayman Islands account in both of our names. I don't know how much it will cost when you receive this letter. I don't consider it a salary per se, but rather an emergency fund to protect you and your family in case something bad happens to them because of your hidden holdings, such as a greedy tax bureaucracy. Hopefully, by the time you read this letter, the company and property will have enough value to make this irrelevant. Mr. Boss Woodworth will provide you with all the legal documentation explaining everything. It will have complete accounts, names, numbers, and a fully updated net worth report. You'll probably read and sign your name so many times that your head will spin and your fingers will cramp, but it'll be worth it. But no matter how much money this property is worth, it can never be worth as much as you meant to me. Farewell, my friend. Hope to see you on the other side. This strict engineer, this stern father could hardly hold back his tears, looking at the letter. My savior came from an unexpected source. Mr. Kai Kramer, or may I call you Davy? I couldn't speak, so I just nodded. James has talked enough about you to make me feel familiar with you, even if we haven't met for a long time. Both James and I foresaw this meeting as a preliminary meeting, and not necessarily as a reading of the will. So I foresee what we're in for closer acquaintance as this property, well, not really property, situation is settled. A lot of time, resources, and money, plus several professionals, went to great lengths to make this transition go the way James wanted. Myself, a tax attorney, a CPA, and an investment manager all contributed to making James' vision a reality. This vision started a lot years ago when you signed the initial documents. My grieving emotions caused by Jimmy's letter subsided as I began to realize the magnitude of what was approaching me, a premonition. James saw this transition as simply a changing of the guard, or perhaps just another pair of hands taking the wheel, hands that were always there just not being used. A paper trail was created, so to speak, showing that your involvement there were more than there really were. No obvious lies or falsifications, just things that could be construed as more involvement. This paper trail was included in company documents dating back years, so it will be difficult to refute. James never wanted a luxurious lifestyle, so he took a small salary and everything else came through the company's assets. His personal assets, although significant, are only a fraction of his net worth. James was a thrifty and cautious man, but he was also adventurous and decisive, was not at all afraid to take reasonable risks. Therefore, his net worth increased much faster than many other people in his position. Unless you plan to make significant changes immediately, I would recommend following his example, at least until you can understand and accept the full implications. My office has prepared these 3 booklets for you. The first booklet is an exact copy of all the formal documentation required for what we will be discussing today and in the near future. The second booklet is a page-by-page explanation for understanding the legal text in formal copy for the layperson. The third booklet contains all the contact information, accounts and agreements with James' other advisors, tax attorney, CPA, fund manager, and, of course, me. Also included is a breakdown and explanation of James Barrett's net worth report, which I will summarize. So let's get down to the money. The manner in which he said it, and the emphasis he placed on it, knocked me back in my chair and heightened my apprehension. Significantly, frosty anticipation and almost fatalistic curiosity descended on me. My life would change. I felt it, but I adored my life. Barrett and Son Roofing, of course, accounts for the majority of James Barrett's net worth. This company's real estate includes a 16-story building and offices in Seguin, a small warehouse, and an equipment repair shop here. Barrett and Son owns its office building, so the rest of the office space is rental income. Roughly the same configuration in Austin, only with a smaller office building, but a much larger repair facility, including the Barrett equipment repair business and staff. Also a much larger warehouse, semi-attached to the Barrett DIY Center, which is not an integral part of Barrett and Son Roofing. It will be listed as a separate item on the net worth report. Barrett and Son has several other properties in Austin, one of which is the 4-bedroom apartment that I believe you and James lived in when you were in college. It is now a rental property, along with several others. The listing is included here in the third booklet. The San Antonio office is again set up in the same configuration: a small office building, a medium-sized warehouse, and a repair shop. However, there are only 2 rental properties in San Antonio, along with the apartment James used when he was there, also included in the listing. In short, Barrett and Son Roofing was valued at $22.6 million. Stunned, I collapsed in a chair. Stunned, I thought he might have $1 million. Surely no more than that. He did not live like a multimillionaire. Barrett DIY Center has its own real estate, store, and inventory, less a small amount of operating debt, also less projected 6 months of operating expenses. These expenses have been allocated to give you time to make decisions about which direction to take. Move. In short, the Barrett DIY Center was valued at $16.8 million. If for some unknown reason a large amount of liquid capital is required, Barrett DIY Center has received an offer from a National Home Improvement Corporation. Although the offer is 2 years old, it is still valid. Additionally, the agreed-upon price will likely be higher than its appraised value. James Barrett's personal investment fund is approximately $6.8 million. The Cayman Islands account in both of our names is $4.2 million. James' personal bank accounts have a balance of $1.4 million. There are 3 educational funds for your children. Each has a balance of $1.5 million, but they will not be included in James Barrett's net worth. Additionally, due to one of James' quirks, all employee health care or pension trust funds are not included in any of James' net worth estimates or reports. Moreover, if any portion of these assets are sold, these employee accounts may not be included or affected, thus preventing any form of hostile takeover that removes these funds. James Barrett's net worth is $51.8 million, of which $12.4 million is in semi-liquid personal funds. $39.4 million of this net worth is in business assets, with approximately 15% in operating capital. The outstanding debt is a very minor item, less than $1 million. James has always donated to several charities. The pledged amount for this year is $2 million, with approximately 30% not yet distributed. I have to say, although James never attended college, his net worth to debt ratio shows that he was a very smart and successful businessman, better than many others with master's degrees. Yes, Jimmy was a very complex man, much more complex than I ever thought. I had absolutely no idea he had that much money. Damn, excuse my French. He never lived better or more luxurious than me, and I don't have nearly as much money. Well, now you have. Yes, James was one of the most extraordinary people I have ever dealt with. A thrifty man with a very high work ethic, an exceptional degree of loyalty. Honest within his own bounds, and yet had the loosest moral principles when it came to women and marriage. Ah, yes, Jimmy's dichotomy, but I always thought I knew the reasons. What could justify his behavior with women and the tragedy that led to his death? Well, not to justify, but perhaps to explain. When he was 12 or 13 years old, Jimmy fell in love with Bethany Scott, and he never stopped loving her. I believe she never stopped loving him either, but because her mother's manipulations led her to marry another man. Because of her mother? Could her mother really have such power over them? Well, she shouldn't have, but she did. She took what was supposed to be a first love and turned it into a story about star-crossed lovers or even Romeo and Juliet. Her dating rules, tantrums, shenanigans, and screaming made it all very dramatic. Because of this drama, their relationship never had time to cool down or grow old. Her further attempts to drive a wedge between them only increased the drama. But in reality, it taught them to deceive each other and everyone they came in contact with. Then, when she bribed Bethany to go to Rice University, pushed them further apart, but without any internal control to remain true to each other. When Bethany got pregnant by one of her lovers at Rice University and married him, it killed Jimmy's desire to ever get married. Yeah, James always said he'd never get married, and that seems to have turned out to be true, because he never did. I think I can kind of understand what you're saying about their youth and drama, but it still does not justify James' behavior. Yes, most of my life I was too close to the drama and never thought much about our behavior. Because in our early years I behaved as badly as Jimmy. But after I married Carrie, she helped me realize what we were doing. She also helped me understand that Jimmy was where he wanted to be, that his behavior was his own choice. I guess I can't consider James my friend, but many times we sat in this office and talked like this, so I understood him to some extent. I once told him that I would never introduce my sisters to him. He laughed and said that I wouldn't have either, but I corrected that by saying that if I wasn't there, I wouldn't hesitate to send my wife, daughter, or sisters to him for help. In fact, he probably would have been mine first choice. Yes, I never quite understood why Jimmy made a distinction between women. The women he talked to in bars he considered toys and somewhat subhuman. But if the damsel in distress was not a toy, Jimmy could be her noble knight on a white horse. Yes, I can see that, and that's what I perceived from our conversations. Well, as much as I enjoyed our conversation, I have other clients and I have to prepare for them. But as I said, I foresaw this meeting as a preliminary one, so I foresee and hope for further conversations with you. I left Mr. Woodworth's office with 3 booklets and a full mind. The family meeting with Carrie and the kids will be long, overwhelming, and tearful. 2 months later, we still haven't decided what we want to do with Jimmy's money. But I had to bury Papa Barrett. When Jimmy died, I suspected his father wouldn't be far behind, but I thought it would take longer than 2 months. What was most intriguing to me was the difference in their funeral services and funerals. Jimmy's funeral attracted a crowd of mourners. Papa Barrett's service brought together 5 of their oldest retirees, his ex-wife Caroline, his nurse and housekeeper, and me and my family. Jimmy and his father were both ladies' men and dance hall cobras. No one would argue with that statement. But beyond those lines, Jimmy tried to be a good person, a caring person who thought about others. While Papa Barrett wasn't a bad person per se, he was somewhat selfish and narcissistic, mostly narcissistic, and that difference showed. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.